Cecilia Cass lived in a gilded cage. Her world, meticulously crafted by her partner Adrian Griffin, felt suffocating. Adrian, a brilliant and controlling optics engineer, dictated every aspect of her life.
His possessiveness disguised as love was a noose around my neck.
He monitored her every move, his presence a suffocating weight on her chest. Fear was a constant companion. Adrian's abuse was insidious, a slow erosion of Cecilia's spirit. He belittled her, isolated her from her loved ones, and chipped away at her self-worth.
I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of my own life.
The thought of escape gnawed at Cecilia's mind, a faint flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. But Adrian's control was absolute. He was always one step ahead, anticipating her every move. Leaving him felt impossible, a terrifying leap into the unknown.
Yet I clung to the belief that I deserved better. I yearned for freedom, for a life where I could breathe without his permission.
This desire, buried deep within her, fueled her desperate plan for escape. The night was dark, heavy with the promise of a storm. The air was thick with tension, as if the very atmosphere knew the gravity of what was about to unfold. It was now or never. Cecilia had been planning this moment for months, every detail etched into her mind. Cecilia, her heart pounding against her ribs, crept out of bed. The fear of being caught was almost paralyzing, but the thought of staying was even more terrifying.
I moved like a wraith, a ghost in my own home, careful not to disturb the sleeping monster beside me. Adrian's snores were a reminder of the nightmare I was leaving behind.
Every creak of the floorboard, every rustle of the sheets, sent shivers down her spine. She had to be silent, invisible, a mere shadow in the night. Her sister Emily waited anxiously outside, the minutes feeling like hours. Their escape plan meticulously crafted over whispered phone calls and coded messages. Every word, every gesture had been a step towards this moment.
A single duffel bag held what little she could grab, a few clothes, some cash, and the remnants of her shattered life. Each item was a piece of her past, a past she was desperate to leave behind.
As Cecilia slipped out of the house and into the waiting car, she felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. A wave of relief washed over her. She had done it. She had taken the first step towards freedom. She had escaped the clutches of her tormentor. But the fear remained, a constant shadow lurking at the edge of her newfound freedom. The fear of being found, of being dragged back into that hell, was a constant companion.
The drive was a blur. The rain pounded against the windows, mirroring the turmoil inside me. I knew that Adrian would be furious, that his rage would know no bounds. He would stop at nothing to find me. The thought of his relentless pursuit was terrifying.
But for the first time in a long time, she dared to hope. Hope was a fragile thing, but it was all she had. The storm broke as they reached their destination, a safe house arranged by Emily. It was a small, nondescript place, but to Cecilia, it was a sanctuary. The rain felt cleansing, washing away the remnants of her past life. Each drop was a promise of a new beginning.
Soaked to the bone, I finally allowed myself a shaky breath. I was free. The realization was overwhelming. I finally allowed myself a shaky breath. I was free. But my ordeal was far from over. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and fears. But for now, I had hope, and that was enough to keep me going.
Cecilia found herself seeking refuge in the home of James Lanier, a former colleague of Adrian's. She had nowhere else to turn, and James's home seemed like a beacon of hope in her darkest hour. The warmth of his welcome was a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive atmosphere she had fled from. James, a kind and compassionate man, offered her the sanctuary she desperately needed. He understood the gravity of her situation and did everything in his power to make her feel safe. His home became a haven, a place where she could begin to piece together the fragments of her shattered life.
My young daughter, Sydney, provided a glimmer of normalcy in Cecilia's chaotic world. Her innocent laughter and playful spirit were a reminder that there was still beauty and joy to be found, even in the midst of turmoil. Sydney's presence was a soothing balm to Cecilia's frayed nerves.
The safe house, tucked away in a quiet suburb, felt like a world away from Adrian's suffocating presence. The serene environment, with its tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors, was a stark contrast to the constant fear and tension Cecilia had endured. It was a place where she could breathe, if only for a moment. The days were quiet, filled with mundane routines that soothed Cecilia's frayed nerves. She found comfort in the simplicity of daily tasks, like cooking meals and tidying up the house. These small acts of normalcy were a welcome respite from the chaos she had left behind. She found solace in caring for Sydney, the little girl's laughter a balm to her wounded soul. Playing games, reading stories, and simply being present with Sydney allowed Cecilia to momentarily forget her troubles. It was in these moments that she felt a glimmer of hope for the future.
However, the fear of Adrian's reach lingered like a specter. No matter how safe she felt during the day, the nights were a different story. The darkness seemed to amplify her fears, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian was always just a step behind her. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that Adrian's eyes were constantly upon me. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the leaves outside, sent a jolt of fear through my body. I was always on high alert, never able to fully relax. That Adrian's eyes were constantly upon me. The paranoia was overwhelming, and it felt like I was living in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I was trapped in a cycle of fear and anxiety, unable to escape the shadow of my past.
She jumped at shadows, flinched at sudden noises, her body still wired for danger. Even the most innocuous sounds could send her into a panic. It was as if her body had been conditioned to expect the worst at any moment. Sleep offered little respite. Her nights were plagued by restless tossing and turning, her mind unable to find peace. The bed that should have been a place of rest became a battleground for her troubled thoughts. Nightmares plagued her, vivid and terrifying reminders of her past trauma. In her dreams, Adrian's face would appear, twisted with rage, and she would relive the moments of terror that had driven her to flee. The nightmares were so real that she would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding.
Adrian's face, contorted in rage, haunted my dreams. His voice, filled with venom and hatred, echoed in my mind. I could hear his threats, feel his presence, even though I knew he was miles away. The fear was inescapable, a constant companion in my subconscious. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the echo of his threats ringing in my ears. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and I was left feeling disoriented and terrified. The nights were long and filled with dread, and I often found myself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep.
Despite the relative safety of the safe house, Cecilia couldn't escape the long shadow of Adrian's abuse. The physical distance from him did little to alleviate the psychological scars he had left behind. She was constantly on edge, always looking over her shoulder, fearing that he would somehow find her. Cecilia couldn't escape the long shadow of Adrian's abuse. The fear, deeply ingrained, was a constant reminder that her escape was only the beginning of a long and arduous journey. She knew that healing would take time, and that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The fear, deeply ingrained, was a constant reminder that her escape was only the beginning of a long and arduous journey. But amidst the fear, there was also a flicker of hope. Cecilia knew that with time, support, and determination, she could rebuild her life and find the peace she so desperately sought. News of Adrian's apparent suicide sent shockwaves through Cecilia's fragile world. The headlines screamed of tragedy, painting a picture of a man who had lost everything and saw no way out. For Cecilia, it was a moment of disbelief, a surreal twist in the nightmare she had been living. The police ruled it an open and shut case, a brilliant but troubled man driven to despair by his wife's abandonment. They saw the evidence as clear-cut, a tragic end to a tumultuous relationship. But for those who knew Adrian, the story didn't quite add up.
But I knew better. I had seen the depths of Adrian's mind, the meticulous nature of his plans. He was a man who thrived on control, who orchestrated every detail of his life with precision. Adrian was too meticulous, too controlling to take his own life. Every action he took was calculated, every move deliberate. The idea of him succumbing to despair and ending his life seemed inconceivable.
His suicide felt staged, a carefully crafted illusion meant to deceive. It was as if he had written the final act of a play, leaving behind a trail of breadcrumbs for Cecilia to follow. A final act of manipulation designed to lure her out of hiding. Adrian's mind games were far from over. They had merely taken on a new, more sinister form. Cecilia couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Every shadow seemed to hold his presence, every creak of the floorboards a reminder of his lingering influence.
Strange occurrences began to plague my life. Objects moved inexplicably, as if guided by an unseen hand. It was as if Adrian's spirit had found a way to continue his torment from beyond the grave. Whispers seemed to follow me in the quiet moments. They were faint, almost imperceptible, but always there, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I felt a constant, unnerving presence, as if someone was breathing down my neck. The sensation was so real, so palpable, that I often found myself spinning around, expecting to see Adrian standing there.
Her paranoia grew, fueled by the unshakable belief that Adrian was still alive. Every day brought new fears, new doubts, as Cecilia struggled to separate reality from the nightmares that haunted her. James, initially sympathetic, dismissed her fears as PTSD. He tried to comfort her, to reassure her that Adrian was truly gone, but his words fell on deaf ears.
Cecilia, you need to relax. You need to find a way to move past this. His voice was gentle but firm, urging her to let go of the past. Try and move on with your life. But how could she move on when every fiber of her being screamed that something was terribly wrong?
But Cecilia couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The sense of dread was overwhelming, a constant weight on her chest. Adrian was gone, but the terror he inflicted continued to haunt her every waking moment. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by endless nights of staring into the darkness, waiting for the next sign of his presence. The fear that had been a constant companion now morphed into something darker, more insidious. It was no longer just about Adrian, it was about the unknown, the unseen force that seemed to be toying with her sanity.
I was no longer just afraid of Adrian. I was afraid of what he had become. The man I once knew had transformed into a specter, a ghost that haunted my every step. I was afraid of what he had become, of the unseen force that seemed to be toying with my sanity. It was as if Adrian had transcended the physical world, becoming something far more terrifying, of the unseen force that seemed to be toying with my sanity. The line between reality and illusion blurred, leaving me trapped in a never-ending nightmare.